There is a time in the life of every seeker, every soul in search of truth, when they come face to face with a realization that changes everything. A realization that the world they have been taught to see is not all that exists, and that there are depths far beyond the reach of conventional understanding. It is in these moments that the seeker begins to question the nature of existence, the divine, and the origins of the myths they have long been told. And somewhere in that search, they begin to discover something hidden, something forgotten. There are beings in the world's mythologies and pantheons who have faded from memory. These ancient deities, once revered and worshipped by civilizations lost to time, have slipped into the void of history. Their names now whispered only in the halls of esoteric knowledge and the forgotten scrolls of mystics. But what if these gods were not lost by accident? What if the truth of their existence, their power, and their purpose was concealed from us, deliberately erased from the collective consciousness of mankind? We've been led to believe that certain gods no longer matter, that their power is irrelevant, that their wisdom belongs only to a time long past. Yet, deep within the subconscious mind, beneath layers of societal conditioning and historical distortion, there remains a stirring, a memory of something sacred, something ancient, something that calls out to us from the forgotten corners of our minds. This is the journey to uncover the hidden gods, the forgotten gods, deities whose presence is still felt, whose influence is still powerful, but whose names and roles have been concealed by the sands of time. This is not simply a search for lost histories or forgotten civilizations. It is a search for truth, a truth that has been buried under centuries of oppression, suppression, and selective remembrance. These gods, whose names we no longer recognize, hold the keys to ancient wisdom, spiritual growth, and the deep hidden forces of the universe. Their teachings are embedded in the energy of the cosmos, in the vibrations of sacred spaces, and in the very DNA of the earth itself. Their return is not a matter of resurrection, but of remembrance. The question is not whether they exist, but how we have allowed their wisdom to fade into obscurity. In this guide, we will dive deep into the forgotten mythologies and uncover the stories of these lost gods. We will explore how they influenced their respective cultures, how they were worshipped, and why they were eventually erased from history. More importantly, we will discuss how we can reconnect with these deities, reawaken their power, and use their knowledge to guide us on our personal spiritual journeys. For some, this may seem like a journey into the realms of fantasy and legend. But for those who are ready to listen, to truly listen beyond the noise of the world, there is a deeper, undeniable truth that beckons from the shadows. The forgotten gods are waiting, and they have much to offer those willing to remember. In every culture, in every corner of the earth, there has been a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each carrying a distinct and powerful role in shaping the universe. These deities were not mere symbols of reverence or figures of myth. They were living forces, tangible embodiments of nature's laws, cosmic principles, and spiritual truths. The deities of ancient civilizations did not simply exist in the realm of stories. They governed the flow of energy, the cycles of time, and the very fabric of the world itself. To understand the forgotten gods, we must first comprehend the importance of gods in general. The ancient world saw deities not as abstract, detached beings, but as vital, active participants in the cosmos. Every god was a force, a vibrational frequency that affected human existence, whether directly or indirectly. From the sun gods who regulated life and death, to the goddesses of fertility who nurtured the soul's growth, the deities were the foundational elements of both the physical world and the unseen realms. Take, for example, the Egyptian pantheon, where gods like Ra, the sun god, and Isis, the mother goddess, held cosmic significance. Ra was not just a god to be worshipped for his light, but a force that dictated the rhythm of the universe, the sun's rise and fall, the seasons, the cycles of life and death. Ra's influence extended beyond the realm of time and space. He was the driving force behind creation, and his energy was felt in every grain of sand, every pulse of the Nile, every beat of the human heart. Isis, on the other hand, embodied the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. Her power was not only the nurturing aspect of the divine, but also the cosmic force of transformation. She represented the cycles of life and the evolution of the soul, and it was through her wisdom that mortals could access the ancient secrets of the universe, especially those related to healing, protection, and magic. In the Hindu tradition, gods like Shiva, the destroyer, and Vishnu, the preserver, represented the eternal cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction. These deities were not opposites in conflict, but different aspects of a unified whole, each maintaining the balance of the cosmos. They were the architects of reality, constantly shifting between states of creation and dissolution. Shiva, through his dance of destruction, was as much a creator as Vishnu, whose role as the preserver ensured the continued existence of life. Similarly, the Greek pantheon was filled with gods who represented the forces of nature, the elements, and human qualities. From Zeus, the king of gods, whose power governed the heavens and the earth, to Athena, the goddess of wisdom, whose intellect shaped the minds of mortals. The Greek gods were reflections of both the natural world and the divine order. But there were others, lesser-known gods, whose roles were just as crucial in maintaining the balance of existence. There were gods whose names have been lost to time, whose functions have been obscured by centuries of evolving belief systems. These deities, often overshadowed by more prominent figures, held profound connections to the workings of the world. Hecate, for instance, the Greek goddess of witchcraft, magic, and crossroads, represented the transformation that happens when one traverses between worlds. She was the guide for souls between life and death, and the keeper of hidden knowledge wisdom that would one day return to those who are ready. The Sumerians had their own forgotten gods, Anu, the god of the heavens, and Enki, the god of water and creation. Enki was the god who brought wisdom to humanity, teaching them the art of writing, building, and understanding the mysteries of the stars. Yet, Enki's wisdom was lost in time, buried under the weight of conquest and the rise of newer belief systems. But traces of his teachings remain in the sacred texts and symbols left behind by those who revered him. And so it was with countless other forgotten gods, the deities whose names and stories have faded into obscurity, but whose influence can still be felt in the subtle currents of existence. Their power was not contained in the pages of myth, but woven into the fabric of reality itself. These gods were the architects of the inner and outer worlds, the forces behind the hidden mechanisms of life that guided humanity's spiritual journey. And yet, time and again, these gods were erased by new religions, by shifting beliefs, by the rise of external authority and control. As we delve deeper into their forgotten histories, we must begin to ask, why were these gods erased? What was their purpose, and why is their wisdom still so important today? The reasons why ancient gods fade into obscurity are as varied as the pantheons themselves. Some of these gods were erased by the hands of conquerors, others by the subtle tides of societal change. But the underlying cause of their disappearance lies in something much deeper force, far more insidious than the mere passing of time. The forgetting of the gods is not merely a historical process. It is a deliberate act, a cosmic forgetting, that serves to shift the balance of power in the human world. We begin by looking at the most obvious reason for the erasure of these deities: the rise of new belief systems. Throughout history, new religions have emerged, bringing with them their own gods, their own cosmic order, and their own myths. The rise of monotheism, in particular, marked a significant turning point in the history of divine erasure. The Abrahamic faiths, which dominated much of the Western world, replaced a pantheon of gods with one all-powerful God, pushing out the old deities and declaring them false idols. This transition wasn't just about theology, it was about control. To establish a singular, centralized power, it was necessary to erase the old systems, the old gods, and the old ways of thinking. But the forbidden gods did not vanish entirely. They were pushed into the shadows, their power concealed beneath layers of dogma, fear, and superstition. And it wasn't just religious authorities that sought to forget these deities. There was a social and political agenda at play. The gods that were once celebrated for their wisdom, their connection to nature, and their deep understanding of the human soul were now seen as primitive or pagan, outdated relics of a bygone era. And as empires expanded and new philosophies took root, the very idea of multiple gods tied to the elements, to the earth, and to the cosmos became heretical. The destruction of sacred sites further contributed to the erasure of these gods. In many cultures, temples dedicated to forgotten deities were destroyed in wars, and their sacred relics were looted or hidden away. In the aftermath of conquest, the victors often sought to remove all traces of the defeated people's religious practices, including the gods they worshipped. The temples of the ancient gods were replaced with churches, mosques, and synagogues, and the stories of these gods were cast aside, reinterpreted, or forgotten altogether. Yet despite these efforts, the forgotten gods never truly disappeared. Their influence lingered in the subconscious, hidden beneath the surface of mainstream religions and cultures. Symbols, rituals, and even stories from old myths resurfaced in unexpected places. Some of these forgotten deities were absorbed into new religious systems, their names changed, their roles altered, but their essence remained the same. In Christianity, for example, many of the Virgin Mary's attributes were borrowed from earlier goddesses like Isis or Diana. Even in modern spiritual practices, echoes of ancient gods can be felt in the use of certain symbols, rituals, and altars. There is, however, another, more subtle reason why the gods were forgotten: the desire for control over knowledge and power. These ancient deities, especially those of older, more decentralized belief systems, were connected to wisdom and spiritual sovereignty. They were gods who taught individual empowerment, who connected humans to the earth, to the stars, and to their own divine potential. This posed a significant threat to the emerging systems of power, which sought to centralize authority and control. If humans were able to reconnect with their divine nature, if they understood that they were already divine beings, they could no longer be easily manipulated or controlled. Therefore, the powers that be worked diligently to ensure that the knowledge of these gods, along with their teachings on personal sovereignty, was erased. This control over spiritual knowledge did not end with the advent of the modern era. It continues to this day in the form of mass media, education systems, and corporate structures that seek to keep the human consciousness trapped in a state of perpetual distraction. It is in this way that the forgotten gods are not just distant deities from the past, but symbols of a deeper truth, a truth that is hidden from the masses, not because it is unimportant, but because it is too powerful. What happens when these gods are forgotten? What does it mean for the collective consciousness of humanity? It means that we forget our connection to the earth, to the stars, and to each other. We lose touch with the natural cycles that govern the universe and the ancient wisdom that once guided us. We become disconnected from the source of all power, from the very divine spark that resides within us. But the true power of these forgotten gods is not gone. It has simply been suspended, waiting for the right moment to return. And that moment, it seems, is now. The forgotten gods were not mere mythological beings. They were active, living forces that shaped the destiny of civilizations. They were intimately connected to the elements, to the land, to the cycles of nature, and to the spiritual essence of humanity. Their stories may have faded from the collective consciousness, but their energy has never truly vanished. This section explores some of these deities gods who once wielded immense power, who were worshipped and honored, and whose influence continues to echo through time. Kalava, the god of time and transformation. One of the most fascinating forgotten gods is Kalava, an ancient deity from a civilization long since lost to history. Kalava was known as the god of time and transformation. Unlike the gods of war or love, Kalava's domain was subtle, influencing the ebb and flow of existence itself. His influence was not immediately obvious, but was deeply embedded in the fabric of nature. He governed the cycles of life, birth, death, and rebirth. Kalava was often depicted as a figure of duality, both creator and destroyer, both beginning and end. His role in ancient mysticism was not simply to mark the passage of time, but to teach humanity how to transcend it. Kalava was worshipped by initiates and mystics who understood that time was not an unchangeable linear force, but a fluid, malleable energy that could be aligned with spiritual growth. The ancient priests who followed Kalava practiced rites that involved deep meditation and rituals of transformation rituals that allowed them to experience the very nature of time, bending it to their will. Yet, as empires rose and fell, Kalava's teachings became lost, overshadowed by more concrete material deities. Time itself was no longer seen as a sacred force to be honored, but as a linear progression to be feared and measured. What if Kalava's teachings could be remembered? What if time could once again be seen as a tool of enlightenment, a means of spiritual evolution rather than a prison that restricts our lives? The forgotten god of time still waits, and his influence lingers beneath the surface of human consciousness, calling to those who are ready to remember. Tiamat, the goddess of chaos and creation. In the ancient myths of the Babylonians, Tiamat was a primordial goddess who personified the chaotic forces of the universe. She was not merely a goddess of destruction, she was also a goddess of creation. Tiamat's role in the cosmos was to bring forth the material world from the formless void of chaos. She was depicted as a massive serpent or dragon, her body a representation of the waters of creation that gave birth to all life. Tiamat's name has been remembered through history as a symbol of destruction, as she was eventually defeated by the god Marduk in a great cosmic battle. But what if Tiamat's true nature was misunderstood? What if she was not an enemy to the gods, but a necessary force of balancing energy that is as essential to creation as order itself? In many ways, Tiamat represents the untamed forces of nature, the ones that humanity has long sought to control. Chaos, after all, is not evil. It is the fertile ground from which new life grows. It is the primordial energy from which all things are birthed. The power of Tiamat was hidden and erased because it represented the wildness of the natural world of force that cannot be tamed by human will. And yet, it is the forgotten goddess of chaos who holds the key to spiritual liberation. She reminds us that to grow, to evolve, and to ascend, we must first embrace the chaotic energies within ourselves, the untamed aspects of our being that have been suppressed and denied. Idin and Eshmun, the gods of healing and transformation, Long before the world was introduced to the concepts of modern medicine, there were gods who governed the realm of healing and spiritual restoration. Idin and Eshmun, two deities from the ancient cultures of the Phoenicians and Carthaginians, were revered as the gods who held the power to heal not just the physical body, but the very soul itself. Idin, the goddess of restoration, was often invoked by those seeking to restore balance to their lives, whether through physical health, emotional healing, or spiritual alignment. Her symbol was a serpent representing the cyclical nature of life and death, and the energy of transformation that flows through all things. She taught that healing was not just about curing diseases, but about realigning the energies of the body with the divine flow of the universe. Eshmun, her male counterpart, was the god of mental clarity and inner peace. Unlike the more destructive gods of war, Eshmun's power lay in his ability to bring stillness to the mind and restore harmony between the body and spirit. His sacred temple was a place of meditation where initiates would seek guidance on their spiritual journeys. There is a profound mystery in the act of remembrance. It is not merely the recall of forgotten facts or figures. It is the reawakening of energies that have long since been concealed, buried beneath layers of time and societal conditioning. The process of reconnecting with the forgotten gods is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a spiritual practice, a deep, mystical journey into the inner realms, where the energies of the old gods still vibrate, waiting for those who are ready to listen. To reconnect with the forgotten deities is to remember something that has always been a part of you. It is to remember the ancient knowledge that resides in your very DNA, the cosmic wisdom embedded in the ether, and the sacred vibrations that are present in all things. These forgotten gods are not distant, ancient beings. They are living forces, accessible through the right spiritual practices and mindful awareness. To reconnect with them, you must begin by tuning into the frequencies they represent. Meditation and inner silence. The first step in reconnecting with the forgotten gods is to cultivate inner silence. In our modern, chaotic world, it is easy to lose touch with the sacred. Our minds are bombarded with distractions, news, social media, and the constant rush of daily life. Yet, in the silence of the mind, in the stillness of the soul, the ancient gods can be heard once again. To begin this practice, find a quiet space, free from distractions. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take a deep breath. Allow your body to relax, releasing tension and worry with each exhale. As you breathe deeply, let go of the outer world and enter the vast inner realms. Focus on the feeling of stillness, the energy of peace that arises when you allow yourself to just be. In this sacred silence, invoke the energy of the forgotten gods. You do not need to speak their names aloud. Instead, feel their presence. Visualize their symbols or their sacred animals, and allow their energy to fill your consciousness. As you breathe, feel the vibrations of their power infusing your being, restoring what was lost, and reconnecting you with the deep wisdom of the cosmos. Through this practice of inner silence, the forgotten gods are not so distant. They are within you, waiting to be called upon. Rituals and symbols. Rituals were at the heart of ancient spiritual practices. They were the keys that unlocked access to the divine, the bridges that connected the physical world with the unseen realms. In many ancient cultures, rituals were not merely ceremonies. They were living, breathing acts of transformation, designed to align the practitioner with the divine energies of the gods. One powerful way to reconnect with the forgotten gods is to create your own rituals, personal, sacred acts that call upon their energies and wisdom. You can use symbols, incense, candles, and offerings to create a space of sacredness and reverence. Each forgotten god has its own unique symbols and attributes. These symbols are not arbitrary. They are the vibrational keys that unlock the essence of the gods they represent. For example, if you wish to connect with Tiamat, the goddess of chaos and creation, you might use serpent imagery, the color green, representing fertility and creation, or water as an offering to honor her primordial power. If you are drawn to Kalava, the god of time and transformation, you may create a ritual that involves the use of clocks, hourglasses, or cycles of the moon symbols that represent time's fluid and eternal nature. By integrating these symbols and practices into your life, you can begin to bring these forgotten gods back into the material world, where they once again influence your thoughts, actions, and emotions. Rituals are not simply about performing actions. They are about aligning with the vibrational frequency of the gods, and by doing so, you allow their energy to flow through you. The power of sound and vibration. Sound has always played a vital role in spiritual practices, from the sacred chants of the Hindu mantras to the rhythmic drumming of African tribes. Sound is a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. When it comes to the forgotten gods, sound can be used to activate their energies and to summon them back into your consciousness. Many ancient cultures understood the power of sacred sound stones, frequencies, and vibrations that could shift consciousness, heal the body, and open portals to the divine. For example, the Egyptians used tonal chanting in their temples to invoke the gods. The Pythagoreans studied the power of sound frequencies and their effects on the body and soul. The sound of the ancient didgeridoo and flutes in indigenous cultures was used to raise the vibrational frequency of the listener, enabling them to connect with the divine. As humanity continues its journey through the ever-shifting tides of time, there is a deep and undeniable longing that stirs within the hearts of many an ancient ache that seems to grow stronger with each passing day. It is the longing for something more than what the modern world offers, something deeper, something that transcends the superficial noise of materialism and distraction. The forgotten gods, whose names have faded from history, are not relics of a bygone age. They are the vibrational architects of the human soul, and their influence is far from over. In fact, their power is returning, quietly, subtly, and with increasing intensity. But how can these forgotten gods, whose stories were hidden by time, still hold power in the modern world? What relevance do they have today, in an era dominated by technology, globalism, and increasingly disconnected societies? The answer lies in the timeless nature of their wisdom and the universal truths they embody. The gods of old were not merely symbols or figures from myth. They represented cosmic forces that transcend time, space, and cultural boundaries. These deities were the embodiments of universal principles, forces that continue to shape the world in ways that are often unseen, yet profoundly felt. The gods of time, chaos, healing, and transformation still influence our lives, whether we acknowledge them or not. And as humanity faces a period of great spiritual awakening and transformation, their influence is once again beginning to rise to the surface. Reawakening the divine feminine. One of the most powerful examples of the return of the forgotten gods is the resurgence of the divine feminine. The ancient goddesses, who were revered for their wisdom, nurturance, and connection to the earth, have long been pushed aside by the patriarchal systems that came to dominate the world. These systems, which have historically suppressed the feminine energies, are now crumbling, and with this collapse, there is a deep yearning for the return of the feminine. This yearning is not just for a return to ancient goddesses like Isis, Athena, or Kali, but for the reawakening of the sacred feminine energy that these deities represented. The rise of the divine feminine in the modern world is not simply a return to worshiping old gods. It is a reclaiming of the spiritual power that has been hidden for so long. The energy of these forgotten goddesses, whose roles were once central to creation, healing, and protection, is being rediscovered in modern spiritual practices. Women and men alike are beginning to embody the wisdom of the divine feminine. Rituals, ceremonies, and meditative practices that honor the feminine energy are becoming more common as individuals reconnect with the ancient teachings of the goddesses. The divine feminine represents the qualities of intuition, compassion, and balance, qualities that are sorely needed in a world that has long been ruled by dominance, war, and greed. The forgotten goddesses are returning to guide us, to show us the way back to wholeness, harmony, and the sacred relationship between all things. The healing influence of forgotten gods. Another significant impact of the forgotten gods on the modern world is their role in spiritual healing. As people become more disillusioned with traditional medicine and the sterile, mechanized approach to health, they are turning back to the ancient practices that recognize the interconnection between body, mind, and spirit. The gods of healing, like Eshmun and Idian, whose energies once governed the sacred art of spiritual medicine, are being rediscovered through holistic healing techniques, such as energy work, crystal healing, and sound therapy. The wisdom of the forgotten gods can be found in the practices that restore balance to the body's energies and align them with the cosmic rhythms. Healing was never just about curing symptoms. It was about restoring harmony between the soul and the body, between the individual and the universe. The modern world, with its focus on disease and treatment, often overlooks the deep spiritual causes of illness, such as emotional blockages, unresolved trauma, and spiritual disconnection. By reconnecting with the forgotten gods and their healing energies, we can begin to understand that true health comes from the alignment of mind, body, and soul with the divine forces of the universe. The return of the archetypal gods in modern consciousness. There is another, more subtle way in which the forgotten gods are impacting the modern world, through the archetypes they represent. These gods are not merely external figures. They are embodied principles that live within the collective consciousness of humanity. The god of wisdom, the goddess of love, the god of war, the goddess of nature's archetypes continue to exist in the unconscious mind, and they shape our behavior, our relationships, and our societal structures. Now that we have explored the ancient deities who once ruled the realms of myth and have understood how their energy continues to affect us today, we must ask ourselves the question: how can we practically integrate the wisdom of these forgotten gods into our daily lives? How can we bring their ancient power into the modern world, not just as abstract ideas, but as living forces that shape our thoughts, actions, and spiritual evolution? The gods of old were not merely figures of myth. They were embodiments of universal principles that govern the cycles of the universe. By reconnecting with their energies, we are tapping into a cosmic wisdom that has always been available to us. The process of integration involves not only learning about these gods, but inviting their energies into our daily existence. This is not a passive practice. It requires conscious action, mindfulness, and dedication. Aligning your daily rituals with the forgotten gods. The first and most powerful way to integrate the energy of the forgotten gods is to create daily rituals that honor their presence in your life. Rituals, in the ancient sense, were not merely ceremonial acts. They were living practices that created a direct link between the divine and the mundane. Whether through meditation, prayer, offering, or contemplation, rituals serve as the anchor that connects you to the divine energy of the gods. Start by choosing a forgotten god whose energy resonates most with you. Perhaps it's Tiamat, the goddess of chaos and creation. if you are feeling a deep need for transformation. Or maybe it's Eshmun, the god of healing, if you are on a path of personal recovery. Create a ritual that honors this god through an offering of light, sound, or symbols. Light a candle or burn incense that corresponds to the deity's sacred elements, such as amber or frankincense for gods of wisdom, or water and sea salt for gods of creation. Place an item, such as a crystal or an image, on your altar or sacred space as a representational symbol of the god's energy. The key is presence. The act of honoring the forgotten gods doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, sincerity, and a deep connection to the energy you're invoking. This practice can be as simple as offering a moment of gratitude before starting your day, or as elaborate as a full moon ritual to invoke the powers of transformation or healing. Living according to the principles of the forgotten gods. Another powerful way to integrate the forgotten gods into your daily life is by living according to the principles they embodied. Ancient gods were not just symbols of power, they were representations of deep universal truths. By aligning your life with these principles, you invite their divine energies to guide your actions, decisions, and relationships. For instance, if you are working to reconnect with Kalava, the god of time and transformation, you might begin to embrace the fluidity of time in your life. Let go of rigid schedules and instead allow yourself to live more in harmony with natural rhythms. Perhaps you find that moments of stillness or deep reflection are more important than rushing through your day. In this way, you are honoring Kalava by accepting time as a fluid, transformative force rather than a linear, restrictive constraint. Similarly, if you are drawn to Isis, the goddess of wisdom and rebirth, you can choose to live according to her principles of renewal and balance. Begin to see each challenge in your life as an opportunity for rebirth, a chance to transform, learn, and grow. Approach relationships with compassion, allowing them to teach you about balance and unity. Isis wisdom teaches us that true power lies not in control, but in surrendering to the flow of life. By aligning your life with the forgotten gods, you tap into their energies and integrate their cosmic teachings into your everyday existence. This process is gradual, but over time, you will notice profound shifts in your inner world, greater peace, deeper understanding, and a stronger connection to the divine. Reclaiming sacred space. A powerful method of integrating the forgotten gods into your life is by reclaiming sacred space. In ancient cultures, sacred spaces were often designated for worship, meditation, and connection to the divine. These spaces, whether they were grand temples or quiet corners in the home, were carefully curated to invite the presence of the gods. In the modern world, reclaiming sacred space is more important than ever. Start by creating a small space in your home that is dedicated to spiritual practice. This can be as simple as a shelf or a corner of your room adorned with symbols, crystals, and artifacts that represent the gods you wish to honor. A small altar with candles, incense, and an image or statue of a forgotten god can be a powerful focal point. It doesn't need to be large or extravagant. What matters is the intention behind the space. As we stand on the threshold of a new age, a deep collective spiritual awakening is unfolding across the globe. The world, as we know it, is shifting not just on a physical level, but on a spiritual level. Humanity is beginning to wake up to the forgotten truths that have been concealed for centuries. And at the heart of this spiritual renaissance are the forgotten gods, whose wisdom, energy, and teachings are being rediscovered by those who are ready to listen. But why is this awakening so important? Why are these forgotten deities returning now, in this moment in history? The answer lies in the very fabric of human consciousness. We are at a critical juncture, a time of great transition. The old world, with its systems of domination, fear, and separation, is crumbling, and in its place, a new world is being born. But for this new world to manifest, we must reconnect with the divine wisdom that the forgotten gods represent. Reawakening the divine feminine for global healing. One of the most profound aspects of the current spiritual awakening is the return of the divine feminine. For millennia, the feminine energy, which is associated with nurturing, creativity, intuition, and healing, has been suppressed. The rise of patriarchal structures pushed the feminine gods and goddesses into the shadows. But as the world transitions into a new age, the divine feminine is making her return both as an energy and as a consciousness that will guide humanity through its next evolution. The forgotten goddesses such as Isis, Kali, Sophia, and Heka represent the full spectrum of feminine power. Their wisdom teaches us that true power does not come from control or domination, but from cooperation, compassion, and balance. The rise of these gods is a call for humanity to embrace emotional intelligence, to heal the wounds of the past, and to restore harmony within the self and the collective. As more individuals, both men and women, begin to reclaim the feminine energy within themselves, they will awaken the divine healing forces that are necessary for the survival of the planet. The forgotten gods of the feminine are reminding us that healing begins not in the external world, but within the soul. When the divine feminine rises in each person, the collective energy of the earth will shift from fear to love, from separation to unity. The return of ancient wisdom for personal and collective transformation. The forgotten gods carry with them not just stories, but ancient wisdom that can help us navigate the challenges we face in the modern world. As humanity struggles with issues such as global conflict, environmental destruction, mental health crises, and spiritual disconnection, the teachings of these ancient deities offer solutions that transcend the limited perspectives of contemporary systems. Take, for example, the god Kalava, the deity of time and transformation. In a world where time seems to be speeding up, where people are constantly overwhelmed by the pressures of modern life, Kalava teaches us to transcend linear time and align ourselves with the eternal present moment. His wisdom shows us that time is not a force to be controlled, but an energy to be harnessed for spiritual growth. By reconnecting with the teachings of Kalava, we can learn how to flow with time rather than resist it, embracing the natural cycles of life and death, creation and destruction as part of the larger cosmic dance. Similarly, the wisdom of Tiamat, the goddess of chaos and creation, teaches us to embrace the unknown, to accept the chaotic, ever-changing nature of the universe as part of the creative process. Far from being a destructive force, chaos is the fertile ground from which new life emerges. In the face of global uncertainty, Tiamat's wisdom reminds us that we do not need to fear chaos, we must learn to navigate it with grace, knowing that from chaos comes the potential for transformation and rebirth. By reconnecting with these forgotten deities, we are able to access ancient knowledge that will guide us through the complexities of modern life, offering clarity, healing, and spiritual growth. The wisdom of these gods is not just for individuals, but is a collective force that can help guide humanity through its spiritual transformation. Embracing the archetypes of the forgotten gods to heal the collective soul. The forgotten gods are more than just figures from ancient myths. They are archetypes, living energies that shape our collective consciousness. These archetypes represent different aspects of human nature and experience: wisdom, power, creativity, healing, and transformation. By reconnecting with these archetypes, we are not just honoring ancient gods, we are healing the collective soul of humanity.